It started with a knock. Not on the front door. On my bedroom window. We lived in a quiet Mormon community in southern Utah. You know the kind, red dust roads, mountains in the distance, and a chapel on every corner. My father was the bishop. My mother played the organ. We weren't polygamists. At least, not officially. But most people knew about the arrangement. Most people didn't ask questions. That night, I was 16. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I was supposed to be at Young Men's Mutual, but I faked a stomachache to stay home. I wasn't in the mood to play Book of Mormon charades in the gym again. I was lying in bed, pretending to read scriptures, when the knock came. Tap, tap, tap. My room was on the second floor, and if you think that's bad, you won't believe what happened next. At first, I thought it was a branch. Maybe the wind. But it was rhythmic. Deliberate. Human. I stood slowly, my socks silent on the carpet, and crossed to the window. It was dark outside, no porch lights facing this side of the house. The glass had a thin layer of dust from the last storm. Tap. Tap. This time louder. I drew the curtain an inch back. At first, I saw nothing. Just the reflection of my own pale face. Then the movement, barely perceptible, just below the frame. A white hand, pressed to the glass, the palm red with blood. Then a face. A woman's face. She was maybe in her 30s, with straw-colored hair, wide frightened eyes, and lips moving without sound. Her expression wasn't angry. It was pleading. I opened the window an inch. She hissed, "Don't tell them I'm here." "What? Who are?" "Shush. Please." She looked over her shoulder, into the dark beyond the roof. "They'll hear." Then, like a shadow, she was gone. I stood there, stunned. She had vanished into the night. I didn't sleep. The next morning, my father was in the kitchen, his smile stretched too wide, buttering toast with precise movements. "You feeling better, son?" "Yeah. Fine." He slid the plate across the table. "That's good. Brother Winlow's family is coming over tonight. Their daughters are your age." "Aha. They might be staying a while. Be polite." Later, while I was brushing my teeth, I looked out the bathroom window across the gravel road to the Winlow property. 3 unfamiliar women were standing in the yard. All dressed in pioneer-style dresses. No shoes. Staring directly at the house. At me. When I looked again, they were gone. That night, Brother Winlow came over. So did the women. Only, they weren't introduced to me. In fact, my mother never looked at them once. They sat silently at the far end of the living room, hands folded, eyes down. The youngest one looked up at me once. She had bruises on her neck. Small ones. Circular. My father and Brother Winlow talked in hushed tones in his office. Then, around 10, the women left. I watched them walk down the driveway barefoot, into the dark. No car. No coats. Just shadows in the moonlight. I asked my mother who they were. "They're guests," she said. "We don't pry into our guests." "What's wrong with them?" She paused at the sink. Her hands were trembling. "Some things don't belong to us. Let them be." The next day, I found something under my bed. A note. Written in smudged pencil on ripped notebook paper. "Please help us." They took our names. I looked around my room. The window was still locked. That Sunday, the bishopric announced that the Winlows would be hosting a special women's devotional in their home. Only invited sisters were to attend. My mom didn't go. But she cried that night, silently, at the kitchen table while my dad prayed with us. I started watching the Winlow house. Every night, one of the women would walk out into the yard and stand facing our house. Just stand. 4 hours. One night, I got the courage to sneak out. I walked down the dirt road barefoot, like them, so my footsteps wouldn't crunch. When I got close enough, I saw her face. It was the same woman from my window. Only this time, her eyes were rolled back white. Her mouth hung open. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. She whispered, "You're next." I ran. The way back to my house felt twice as long as the way there. My feet slapped against the road, cutting on rocks, scraping on gravel, but I didn't stop. Not even when I tripped and tore the skin off my knees. Not even when I looked back and saw her still standing there, not chasing me, not even moving, just watching, like she knew it didn't matter how far I ran. Like it was already done. When I got back inside, I locked the front door, the back door, all the windows. I shut the blinds, turned off the lights, and hid under my covers like I was 6 again. But the fear didn't pass. It settled into my chest like a second heartbeat. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I didn't want to, I didn't know how. How do you explain to your father, a man who preaches every Sunday about eternal families and sacred covenants, that one of his brethren is keeping women like livestock in his house? How do you explain that one of them whispered, "You're next"? Instead, I tried to forget. To move on. But the town wouldn't let me. The next week, a new girl joined our Sunday class. Her name was Mary, or at least that's what the teacher called her. She sat in the corner, eyes downcast, hands folded in her lap. I knew that face. She was one of the barefoot women from the Winlow house. I kept sneaking glances at her during the lesson. She never looked up, not even once. Then, when class ended, and the teacher was distracted chatting with a parent, she slipped something into my hoodie pocket as she walked past. I pulled it out in the bathroom. Another note. Meet me behind the chapel after midnight. Don't tell anyone. Please. That night, I snuck out through the basement window and cut through the neighbor's yard. The moon was a thin crescent, just enough light to see the path behind the chapel. I waited under the cartonwood tree, every crack of wind sounding like footsteps. She arrived 10 minutes late. Alone. She was wearing the same dull prairie dress, her blonde hair in a tight braid. She didn't speak at first. Just looked at me like she was trying to decide if I was worth the risk. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said finally. "Then why are you?" "Because I saw your eyes when you looked at us. You weren't like the others." I wanted to ask who the others were, but I already knew. The fathers. The brothers. The ones who nodded along during Sunday school, quoting scripture about obedience while quietly controlling everything around them. "They took my name," she said. "What does that mean?" She shook her head. "They gave me Mary. But that's not who I was. They made me forget the rest." "How long have you?" "Too long." There was a silence then. A heavy one. "They're not just hurting us," she said. "They're doing something else. Something worse." I waited. "They call it the Order of Sarah. It's not part of the church. Not officially. But it's old. Older than this town. They believe in preparing the women. Breaking them. Cleansing them." She stopped talking. I realized her hands were shaking. Cleansing them for what? Mary looked up at me, finally. Her eyes were wet, her voice barely a whisper. "For him." Before I could ask anything else, she shoved another paper into my hand and ran off into the trees. I stood there alone, heart racing, until I was sure she was gone. The paper was a hand-drawn map. It showed the back of the Winlow property. There was an X behind a barn. Underneath, just 2 words, "Help us." Underscore 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 underscore. The next day, I cut school. My parents didn't notice. They were distracted by something else, a ward emergency, my dad said, his tone tight, like he wasn't supposed to talk about it. He left early with 2 other men from the bishopric. My mom stayed home, pale and quiet, reading her scriptures but never turning the page. I waited until noon, then took my bike and rode out past the edge of town, ditching it in the trees near the Winlow property. From a distance, the house looked like any other, modest, tan siding, dusty windows. But the land stretched far behind it. A fence ran around the backyard and past that was the barn. No animals. No crops. Just dirt, and silence, and that unsettling emptiness you feel when something is very, very wrong but nobody around you admits it. I followed the map, keeping low, moving through the bushes. As I got closer to the barn, I smelled something foul. Not manure. Something sweet and sour and sick. I found the X. It wasn't a treasure. It was a trapdoor. I pulled it open. Wooden stairs led down into the dark. The air smelled like mold and rusted metal. My instincts screamed to run, but I thought of Mary's eyes, and I went down. The walls were dirt. The ceiling low. At the bottom, a hallway stretched in both directions. I followed the one to the right. The first door I came to was locked. Heavy. Reinforced. I heard something behind it, a scraping, a whimper. Then silence. The next door opened with a creak. Inside was a small room. No windows. Just a mattress on the floor. A bucket in the corner. And carvings on every wall, symbols, names, prayers. One name was repeated over and over, scratched so deep the wood had splintered. Sarah. Then I heard the footsteps. I barely made it out in time. I crouched behind a stack of crates as someone came down the stairs. I recognized the voice. Brother Winlow. She's been asking questions, he said to someone above him. I think the one called Mary is starting to remember. You know what to do, said a second voice. My father's. I stopped breathing. She'll be sent back to the retreat, my dad continued. We'll call it a transfer. Say her family moved. It's happened before. She's too close to that boy. I saw them talking. Then keep them apart. Their voices faded. I waited until I couldn't hear anything else. Then I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at the bike, back on the road, back in my bed pretending to sleep while my mind screamed and spiraled. My dad was part of it. Underscore 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 underscore. The next week, Mary was gone. I asked around at church. Everyone shrugged. My Sunday school teacher said she moved to Colorado. But she said it too quickly. Like it was rehearsed. That night, I biked to the edge of town and followed the old logging road that led up to the retreat. It was a place they sent troubled youth. I'd only heard rumors. Most kids joked about it. Said if you skipped seminary too many times, you'd end up there. But Mary had called it something else. Not a place for healing, a place for breaking. The road was steep, overgrown. I had to ditch the bike and walk the last mile. The retreat was bigger than I expected. A 3-story stone building, almost like an orphanage, with no signs, no flags. Just iron bars on the windows and floodlights on the roof. I stayed hidden in the trees. I saw movement near one of the side doors. A woman came out. I recognized her dress, plain, gray. Her hair was in braids. But it wasn't Mary. Then I saw the brand. A mark on her forearm, burned into her skin. OS, the Order of Sarah. She wasn't escaping. She was watching. A guard. Suddenly, I understood, it wasn't just some fringe cult thing. This wasn't just Winlow and my dad. This was bigger. Organized. Institutional. And they were recruiting. Or worse. Raising. That night, I tried to talk to my mom. I told her I thought something terrible was happening in town. That I had seen things. Heard things. She didn't say a word. Just stared at her lap. Then she whispered, "Don't end up like your sister." I froze. "I don't have a sister," I said. She looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "You did." That was when everything broke open. The dreams started. Screams in the dark. Faces without names. A room I didn't recognize, but it felt familiar. Like I'd been there before. Like part of me never left. One night, I woke up with dirt under my fingernails. Another night, I found my window open from the outside. And always, there was a whisper in the wind, "You're next." Underscore 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 underscore. 1 week later, during sacrament meeting, the chapel went dark. Just for a moment. The lights flickered, the MIC cut out. When it came back, everyone pretended nothing happened. But I saw the woman. Standing at the back of the chapel. Pale. Bloody. Eyes wide. It was Mary. Only no one else seemed to see her. She raised a shaking hand and pointed at me. Then she mouthed something. "Remember." I blacked out. When I came to, I was in the church bathroom, my father crouched over me. You fainted, he said. Too much stress. But I saw the fear in his eyes. He knew what I'd seen. That night, I returned to the barn. This time with bolt cutters. I went back to the trapdoor. Back down the stairs. I opened every door. I found journals. Names. Records. Women who'd been cleansed. Some survived. Some didn't. In the last room, I found a chair. And on the wall above it, in blood. We are Sarah. We remember. Then I heard the footsteps again. This time, I didn't run. I didn't run. I should have. Every instinct screamed it. But I didn't. I stood in that underground hallway, blood scrawled on the wall, the faint smell of rot and metal pressing in from all sides, and I waited. The footsteps were slow. Deliberate. The sound of boots on dirt. When he came into view, it wasn't Brother Winlow. It was my father. He didn't flinch when he saw me. Didn't yell. Didn't even look surprised. He just stared at me for a long time, like he was calculating something behind those calm, steady eyes. You weren't supposed to see this, he said. I wanted to speak. To demand answers. But my voice caught in my throat. You don't understand what we're doing here, he said. But you will. He stepped forward, slow and careful, like approaching a wild animal. We're saving them. Preparing them. You saw what's out there, how the world treats women. This is something better. This is sacred. I backed toward the far wall. You locked them in cages, I said. You branded them. We set them free, he whispered. They don't carry the burden of choice. They don't drown in sin. They serve something higher. Who? I demanded. Who do they serve? He smiled. And in that smile, I saw something unrecognizable. Not madness. Not cruelty. Faith. Absolute, unshakable faith. You'll understand, he said. We all come to him in time. The order chose you. We thought maybe you'd need more time, but... He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth bundle. He set it on the floor and stepped back. I hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a necklace. Hand-carved wood strung on leather, with a strange symbol burned into the charm. It looked ancient, half rune, half letter. Your mother wore it, he said. Before she was ready. Before she locked it away. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't go home. I stayed in the woods, curled beneath an old hunting blind, my mind spiraling into places I didn't know existed. I couldn't go to the police. 2 months ago, I saw the chief take sacrament from my father's hands. I couldn't talk to friends, they were all sons of men in the order. Even the women in our town, they wouldn't help. Most didn't even remember. Whatever the order did to them, it erased the edges of who they were. Left only obedience behind. But Mary remembered. And if she could remember, so could the others. So I made a plan. The next day, I stole a church roster from the meeting house and highlighted every woman I remembered seeing in the grey dresses. Then I followed them. One by one, over the next week, I tracked their routines. Some worked at the church's family center. Others cleaned the temple. Some simply wandered the town in pairs, always silent, always watching. At night, I left notes under their doors. Do you remember your name? Most disappeared the next day. But one slipped a note back under my own door. Yes. Her name was Ruth. She had been taken at 15. Her real parents lived in Idaho. The order told her she was abandoned. That she was chosen by God to serve. Her husband was a 71-year-old man from the stake presidency. We met behind the school gym. She told me the order's true purpose. It's not about faith, she whispered. It's about sacrifice. What do you mean? They believe that through obedience, the women become vessels. That through discipline, pain, and ritual, they can call him. Not God. Not Christ. Something older. Who? She looked me dead in the eyes. The husband. I didn't understand. They think Sarah was the first, she said. From the Bible. Abraham's wife. They say she gave everything. Her body. Her will. Her son. That she died not of old age but of spiritual purity. She was the first to be taken. I wanted to dismiss it as delusion, as brainwashing. But Ruth wasn't crazy. She showed me the scars. Not just physical ones, brands, cuts, burned scripture fragments stitched into her sleeves, but emotional ones, too. A blankness that sat just behind her words, like something was broken and taped back together wrong. "They're planning another ceremony," she said. "This weekend. The Red Moon. What happens?" She didn't answer. Underscore 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 underscore. Friday night, I broke into the chapel. I'd stolen my father's keys while he slept, memorized the alarm code from watching him during tithing collections. I crept through the side door and down the hall into the bishop's office. In the bottom drawer was a folder labeled OS. Inside, photos, notes, diagrams, maps of the barn, lists of participants, names I recognized, Mary, Ruth, others. And beside them, dates, measurements, ritual markings. There were transcripts of interviews, confessions from women too broken to resist. Details of ceremonies, sacrifices, births. I froze at one photo. It was my mother. But she looked different. Younger. She was wearing the grey dress. She was standing in the circle with others. Eyes rolled back. Hands folded. And behind her, cloaked in robes, face hidden, stood my father. And something else. A tall, shadowed figure just beyond the candlelight. Barely visible. Horns. Elongated arms. A blur where the face should be. The husband. I dropped the folder and ran. That night, I called Ruth and told her everything. She didn't answer. The next morning, the bishopric announced that Ruth had left town to serve a mission. I knew what that meant. I knew where she was. I went back to the barn that night with a crowbar and a flashlight. The trapdoor was gone. In its place was fresh cement. No stairs. No hallway. Just cold stone and the faint scent of blood. But I wasn't the only one there. I heard movement behind me, turned, and saw the woman from my window. Mary. Only it wasn't her. Her body moved like it was being pulled from inside. Her mouth was too wide. Her eyes too still. She took a step toward me and I dropped the crowbar. When she spoke, it wasn't her voice. "You're next." And then she crumbled. Just collapsed, like a puppet with cut strings. No breath. No pulse. Just silence. Until the wind picked up, carrying with it a whisper I will never forget. "He is coming." The next morning, they found her body on the side of Highway 89. Mary. No ID. No purse. No shoes. The official story was exposure. She wandered into the cold, disoriented. Probably mentally ill. Tragic, but not suspicious. The town mourned, with hollow prayers and casserole dishes delivered to no one in particular. But I knew the truth. And I knew she was warning me. The last words spoken through her, "He is coming," haunted me every second. I stopped going to church. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. And the town noticed. My father came into my room on Sunday afternoon, holding my old seminary manual like it was a leash. "We missed you at sacrament," he said, sitting on the edge of my bed. I didn't answer. He stared at me a long time, then said something I'll never forget. "You've been chosen." "For what?" "To lead." He opened the book, revealing a carved hole in the center and inside it, a long silver needle. "I was younger than you when they told me. It's passed through blood. Through devotion." I backed against the headboard. "They think you're ready," he said. "They're wrong." He laughed softly, like I had said something charming. "Everyone says that. At first. I'm not going to be like you." He stood, needle still in hand. "Oh, you'll be better." That night, I made the decision to burn it all down. Not metaphorically. I wanted to end the order. Whatever it took. I broke into the town records building using a set of copied maintenance keys I stole during my community service project the year before. I scanned property records, meeting minutes, police reports that had been redacted until they were barely legible. And then I found it. An old blueprint. The original floor plans for the church property and its surrounding buildings, including a tunnel system beneath the chapel and the Winlow house. It connected several structures, the barn, the retreat, even the cemetery. They'd built it in secret, over decades, funded through church welfare projects. A literal underground network. It was all real. I spent the next 3 days preparing. I stole chemicals from the high school lab. Gasoline from my neighbor's garage. I mapped every exit, every entry point, every structural weak spot I could identify. And then I waited for the red moon. Underscore 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 underscore. The night of the ceremony, the town was empty. Not quiet, empty. I stood on the ridge above the retreat, looking down at the parking lot filled with vehicles. SUVs. Minivans. Trucks. All of them from familiar families. Men I'd seen shake hands on Sunday. Women I'd seen crying during Relief Society. They were all down there. And I was up here. I made my way down the old service road and slipped in through the back. Inside, the building was silent. No alarms. No guards. But I could hear them. Voices echoing from below. Chanting. I followed the sound down a flight of stairs and through a series of industrial hallways, then down a ramp carved from stone. There were candles in the walls. Symbols etched into the floor. And then I reached the main chamber. A circular room with pews arranged like spokes around a raised platform. On that platform stood the women. Grey dresses. Blank faces. And in the center, bound and blindfolded, was Ruth. She was alive. The congregation began to chant, their voices rising in unnatural unison. And Sarah obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord. Whose daughters ye are, as long as ye do well. I saw my father standing at the edge of the circle, robed, holding the silver needle. Beside him, 2 other men. One was Brother Winlow. The other I couldn't recognize. He was taller. Pale. His eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too dark. He wasn't from our town. I slipped through the shadows to the outer edge of the chamber, knelt behind a low stone wall, and pulled the gas canister from my pack. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unscrew the cap. I poured the fuel across the floor, over the pews, along the old books stacked on the altar. Then I struck the match. It was like setting off a scream. The fire roared to life, orange and angry. The robed figures turned in chaos. The chanting stopped. Ruth screamed. I ran for her. I didn't make it. 2 hands grabbed me from behind, slamming me to the stone floor. I twisted, kicked, clawed, but it was no use. My father stood over me, the silver needle now glowing red in the firelight. Son, he said, this is mercy. Then he raised the needle. But Ruth, God bless her, broke free. She lunged at him, biting his hand so hard he dropped the needle. That was all I needed. I tackled him into the fire. And in that moment, everything, the chamber, the pews, the order, became smoke. I dragged Ruth out as the ceiling collapsed. We crawled through the tunnel and out a side exit just as the flames swallowed the entrance. The town heard the explosion. They saw the smoke. They came running. But by the time they got there, the fire had already done its work. The tunnels collapsed. The altar was ash. And most of the order, including my father, was gone. Underscore 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 underscore. Ruth disappeared the next day. I never saw her again. I told the police everything about the underground rooms, the women, the order. They found nothing. No survivors. No records. No proof. They said it was an electrical fire. A tragic accident. Closed the case in 3 days. But I know what I saw. I still live in this town. I'm older now. Quieter. Sometimes, I pass the chapel at night, and I swear I see someone standing in the shadows. Not a person. A presence. Tall. Horned. Watching. And sometimes, I hear a whisper on the wind. Just one word. Sarah. It's been 5 years since the fire. They rebuilt the chapel. New carpet. New lights. A fresh coat of white paint over everything that once reeked of blood and rot. They even rededicated the building in a special service presided over by a visiting general authority. But some of us remember what was there before. And some of us never forget. I kept my head down after that night. No more poking around. No more questions. The only reason I wasn't excommunicated, or worse, was because the surviving members of the order didn't want to draw attention. You don't survive for generations by making enemies in daylight. They buried the evidence. They even held a funeral for my father. Closed casket. I didn't go. I was told later that his body had never been recovered. That's the phrase they used. Never been recovered. But sometimes I think they meant something else. That he was never meant to stay buried. Ruth vanished completely. I searched for months. Made burner accounts online. Tried connecting with ex-FLDS survivors and underground women's shelters. Posted on forums using coded language we used as kids. Nothing. But then, last year, I got a postcard. No return address. No message. Just a drawing. A crude sketch of a tree growing out of cracked stone. And beneath it, the words. The husband never dies. But he can be forgotten. It was her handwriting. I don't know where she is. But I know she's still fighting. Sometimes, late at night, I see the women again. Not really, just in dreams. But the dreams are so real, I wake up with their names in my mouth like ash. Sarah. Mary. Ruth. Esther. Names stripped from them, now returned to me. In my dreams, they lead me down the tunnels again, only this time the walls are breathing. The stone is soft. Wet. And far ahead, I see him. Standing taller than the ceiling, no face, no voice. But I know what he wants. He wants obedience. And worse, he wants worship. And every time I wake up, I go to the mirror and check my eyes. To make sure they're still mine. Underscore 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 underscore. Last week, I got called to speak in church. A surprise invitation. They said they needed strong young men to take on more leadership in the ward. I said no. The bishop smiled. Just like my father used to. You'll come around, he said. The next morning, I found a grey dress folded neatly on the hood of my car. No note. Just the dress. The same kind the women used to wear. Only this one was too small for an adult. Too small for a woman. But just right for a child. I live alone. I don't have a daughter. But if someone's trying to tell me something, I already understand. The order isn't gone. It's sleeping. Regrouping. Waiting for the next red moon. And I think they're starting over. With a new generation. New names. New Sarahs. So I did what Ruth told me. I forgot. Or tried to. I changed my number. I deleted the photos. I threw the necklace in the lake where no one will ever find it. But last night I heard the knock again. On the window. Second floor. Same rhythm. Tap. 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 I didn't open the curtain. I didn't need to. Because I already knew what I'd see. Hair in braids. Lips cracked with blood. Eyes wide and blank. And a voice that whispers like wind through old tunnels. We remember. And I do. I remember everything. This story was completely true, except for all the parts that weren't. Thanks for listening. That's how it happened, or didn't. But if it did, don't think it couldn't happen to you. Subscribe to It Happened to Me, a new story drops daily.